What's up, guys? I'm Evan Lasek. If you watched last week, welcome back. If you're new, this is my segment, If I Were in Your Shoes. Basically, it's just me talking about my opinion on what I would do in various teams and divisions' shoes if I were the head coaches or the GMs preparing for the upcoming season. Last week, we talked about the AFC East, the Patriots, the Jets, and can't remember the other two, the Bills, and then the Dolphins. Just remembered them. But this week, we're going to be talking about the AFC North, the hometown Steelers right there. That's my hometown right there. Pittsburgh represent. And Browns, Bengals, and Ravens, what I would be doing if I were in charge of those teams. We're going to start with the Steelers because you may save the best for last, but in this case, you always save the best for best and just keep people involved. So, Pittsburgh Steelers, if I was Mike Tomlin, he just lost Javon Hargrave. This is an iffy move, but you guys are a winning team. You need somebody to replace that defensive tackle. Now, Jadeveon Clowney is a name that comes up, but he's a defensive end, so it's a little difficult to move a defensive end to defensive tackle. But with T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree there, you're not going to notice much of a change. They run a lot of 3-4 stuff, so being able to slide in Clowney if they do end up wanting him at all, this is just what I would do because I like big-name players. So bringing in Clowney and putting him in that 3-4 front and making it a 4-4 or a 4-3, that would be insane for the Steelers' defensive line. Again, Hargrave went to the Philadelphia Eagles. He was a huge piece in that defense last year, very productive defensive tackle, and losing him is going to hurt their run defense very, very much. So adding a key piece like Clowney, a big name, a big player who can really run, stop, and pass rush, I think would just put the Steelers back on top of the defense. They're coming off the best defensive performance of recent memory for them, ever since probably the Steel Curtain, or early 2010s where they just demolished all the time. But Clowney filling in for Hargrave would be fantastic. Pairing him with T.J. Watt, Bud Dupree, and Cam Hayward, I think that would just be a nightmare for offensive lines. Now to talk about another member of the defense, Edmonds, the safety they took, I believe, 2 years ago. He has really not done much. So focusing on him, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick at free safety. Your strong safety is lacking, though. He really has been struggling, and I think this is his make or break year for him. So Mike Tomlin is really good, as we saw with Bud Dupree, somebody who was not very experienced. He was not putting out the production that he needed to. I think he'll be able to get Edmonds that same production he did for Dupree last year. So hopefully Mike Tomlin can really focus on him, get him to the level that he wants to be playing at. He was a first-round pick, as was Bud Dupree, so focusing on those main guys who you want around for the long term, that's going to be the most important. So Edmonds is the guy that I want to watch very carefully this year. I'm going to be pushing him no matter what through practice and through games. And if he doesn't pan out this season, I think it is time to move on from him. It's going to take a little bit of cap, but he's not the player that as of right now, he hasn't showed the people that he's the player that the Steelers wanted to take, and that can change this defense around. Fitzpatrick has filled great shoes, but you really need that safety duo like we had with Ryan Clark and Troy Polamalu back years and years ago. So the Steelers have Joe Hayden, they have Steven Nelson over there, and then I believe they still have Mike Hilton. I can't remember if he left in free agency or not, but Tremaine Edmonds, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joe Hayden, and Steven Nelson could be a deadly secondary duo for this defense. Going to the offense, they used their first pick in the draft on Chase Claypool, a wide receiver out of Notre Dame. Big, bulky guy, kind of resembles a tight end build. They were talking about moving him to tight end, but signing Eric Ebron and having Vance McDonald already, that's your two tight ends. Give Chase Claypool first-team reps immediately because he's that big, bulky receiver you need on the outside to take some pressure off of Juju. Deontay Johnson is going to be great in the slot. Juju, now that he has Big Ben back, and hopefully he stays with no injuries this season, that could be a deadly receiver duo. We saw Deontay Johnson kill it in the slot with his pure speed. Juju really didn't have any chemistry with Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges, so having Big Ben back is really going to help very much for the Steelers. Chase Claypool is going to be a big, bulky guy. You put him in immediately over James Washington, and I promise you will see production. He's a big guy, and I think the receiving corps will really get back on track. Now, a tricky part here is Jalen Samuels, the James Conner, Jalen Samuels debate. So, in my opinion, I'm starting with Jalen Samuels. He really was productive. He had a lot of catches from the backfield, kind of like we saw from Le'Veon Bell a few years ago. Big Ben really likes to check it down, and Samuels was much better at that. I'm not hating on James Conner at all. I really like him as a running back, but his injuries are kind of substantial for how young his career is. So leaning on him is very difficult. I really expected the Steelers to go with J.K. Dobbins in the draft instead of Chase Claypool, but things happen. I was wrong a lot during the draft. But Jalen Samuels is a Steelers back. He's a running back that can catch out of the backfield. He's an elusive guy, and he can ground and pound when you need to. James Conner is kind of a one-dimensional guy. He really lowers his shoulder, and he can get past people. But a running back by committee led by Samuels, I think, will be much more productive. It'll take the weight off of James Conner's body, and he won't be hurt as much. So you'll be able to keep two running backs through the whole entire year. That would be the most crucial part of having Samuels run. The problem with last year for the Steelers was the injuries on offense that they sustained. So having Samuels, a young guy who has some experience now, start in the backfield, really catch passes out of the backfield, kind of very reminiscent of what Le'Veon Bell did with other running backs as his backup. So I believe Samuels should be the first running back, and then Connor's that third down guy who's going to get you those yards. And then the final thing I want to say for the Steelers is I'm taking it easy on Big Ben throughout this. I know he's healed. He's lost a lot of weight. He put on muscle. He says his elbow is perfectly fine, but elbow injuries at his age are very damaging to a career. So you may not be seeing him throw the ball 40, 50 yards downfield. It's going to be what we saw from Phillip Rivers, Tom Brady, Eli Manning, where they're just check down, check down, check down. These are older guys. They're past their prime. They're kind of fighting still to be in the NFL. So I think that they really need to take it easy on Big Ben this year. Hopefully he used to fight off sacks. Hopefully he just goes down, because we really don't want to see him get hurt at this stage of his career. That could be career ending, as this elbow injury almost was. So taking it very easy on Big Ben through practices, preseason, and then regular season, I think will be very substantial if they want him to play for 2-3 more years, like they claim they want to. So Ben's gonna, if I'm coaching Ben, I'm not calling a lot of deep shots. I'm calling a lot of slot plays, curl routes, ins, outs, kind of like what we saw Michael Thomas and Drew Brees run. I think that would just be much more beneficial to both Big Ben and the Steelers. All right, that brings me to the Cleveland Browns. Now, I said I want the Steelers to sign Clowney, but if I'm the Browns, I'm going all in on Jadeveon Clowney. Pairing him with Myles Garrett would just be a deadly defensive end duo. I think that would just be scary for opposing quarterbacks, because you can't stop both of them. One of them is constantly going to get to you and cause pressure. So not worrying about signing other key pieces is very concerning, yes, but they're a young team. They can develop players. So getting those older guys that can fill a role is not going to be necessary. You have a new coach, and you want to kind of put a guy there that can be the franchise token, and you just rely on all the time. You can develop with the coach. He's there for a longer tenure. So I think having Clowney and Garrett there on the defensive line would just be huge for this team, and I think it would just cause a lot of mayhem for the opposing offense, honestly. But I want to talk about Baker Mayfield. This is going to be a little bit longer, I think. I really like Baker, but Baker really, really struggled last year. He had a great rookie year. Now you can call that just complete luck, but Baker really didn't develop at all in his sophomore season. He did not look good at all. He did not play very well, and it was very concerning as a Browns fan. You took this guy number one. He was supposed to be the quote-unquote best QB in the draft, but last year he looked like garbage. So my only thing with Baker is you do not bench him, no matter how bad he plays. He was your first pick, and I know it's a new head coach, and a different head coach took this guy, but they took him for a reason. He's 23, 24 years old at this point. You don't give up on him yet. You let him play 16, and if your team is really, really bad, then you think about taking a replacement. But he's got one more year left on his rookie contract after this year, so sticking with him, keeping him there, is going to be essential in his development. Yes, we have Odell, we have Jarvis, we have Austin Hooper, and Nick Chubb. So I think that's a lot of offensive pieces that he needs to gain chemistry with. They kind of just threw him those players and were like, here, you're going to just develop instantly if you're that good. But the thing is, you need chemistry with these guys, and they kind of just threw Odell in. Odell started getting frustrated because he went from Eli Manning to Baker, a young guy who can air the ball out, but then none of that ever happened. It looked like Baker didn't really trust throwing the ball to Odell that much because they just started playing together. He was much more comfortable throwing to his tight ends and Jarvis Landry. So with year 2 of Odell and Baker, I think there's going to be a lot more chemistry between the two of them. And I think maybe, I think it could be a lot better. I think Odell was very close to 1,000 yards last year, but with year 2 of Baker, their chemistry is going to be a lot better. They already know how each other plays, and at the end of the season, we started to see Odell heat up with receiving yards. Baker started looking a little bit better, but again, if he throws 5 interceptions in the game, a lot of quarterbacks have done that. You don't give up on him because he's young. You can develop him. There's a new head coach, there's a new offense. You got to give these guys a break. They haven't had an offseason to work with each other, so first 8 weeks, you give them a lot of leeway because you know what kind of situation they put into. They didn't have time for training. They didn't have time to practice with each other. And it's honestly, I think Baker's going to take a big step up with Odell. I think him and Jarvis are still going to have chemistry. Austin Hooper, they paid him a lot of money for a good reason. He was one of the best tight ends in the NFL last year. So I think having Baker with Odell for a second season is really going to make year 3 for Baker Mayfield a lot better. You do not give up on him. You just keep giving him the ball, and because if you bench him, you take his confidence away, and that'll destroy you for the rest of the season, and that's not a good look as the new head coach of a team. Speaking of Odell, we saw it in the Giants locker room. He was a nuisance, to say the least, to put it very nicely. And I'm not just saying that because he's an Eagles fan. Yes, he's very, very annoying. His attitude is, it's up there. But having Odell in your locker room where he thinks he's the best person to ever walk into that locker room, which, I mean, you're the Browns, he potentially could be, but it's Odell. He's really good, but he can be a nuisance. He basically pushed his way out of the Giants locker room, and mainly because of his relationship with Eli Manning. They struggled throwing the ball. Their chemistry was off. He wasn't doing what he wanted to, so Odell wanted to go somewhere else. Then he kind of pitched a fit whenever they did trade him, which was weird. So if Odell is too much of a nuisance this year and he's just causing too many problems in that team, then I think you have to get him out of there because that's just not a new thing. That's not a problem you want for a new head coach. That's just a bad look, and you don't want to deal with it right away, especially when Odell has more experience in the NFL than the new head coach does. So I would definitely get rid of Odell if he started causing problems, talking smack on Baker, all that stuff, kind of tweeting at him like we saw other receivers do and other players do this past offseason, or not offseason, this past season. So if Odell is too much, you just get rid of him. He's a talented player. You're going to get picks for him. You're going to get players for him. You're comfortable with the other receivers you have on your team. You can draft a new receiver. So, yes, Odell is extremely talented. He's a player you really want, but there's already been talks about him wanting out of Cleveland, telling teams to come get him. You can call it a lie. You can call it whatever, but it's out there already. And that's already a very negative locker room chemistry between everybody in there, knowing that Odell wants out of that team. So I don't blame them if they stick around because of his talent, but honestly, if it gets to be too much, I'm shipping away Odell, getting picks. And the next person you ship away is Njoku. They kind of did Njoku dirty here. Njoku wasn't a player that Stefanyak took. He took Njoku, or he had Njoku from the last head coach, and then got Austin Hooper. Great pickup. Drafted a tight end in the second round. So David Njoku, very injury prone, but he's a very athletic tight end. So it's very difficult to say just get rid of him because of his ability on the field. He just doesn't fit right now. He kind of feels left out. He wants to be gone, and I do not blame him. They kind of disrespected him by getting his replacement, getting the guy who's going to take over eventually. So getting rid of David Njoku, you're going to get a pick for him, 2 picks maybe, depending on what round they are. But I would get rid of Njoku, plan for the future. Austin Hooper's, I think, 25, 26 years old, so you'll have him for the foreseeable future. Njoku was that guy, but now he's not. Injuries got way too much. I think he missed 12 games last season, which is really rough for a tight end that they really relied on. So trading him is the most essential thing. He wants out. You don't want a guy there, especially, like I said with Odell, as a new head coach, you don't want to deal with this kind of stuff. You just want to move on, get in your regimen, and then work with the guys that you want on your team and that want to play for you. Speaking of brand new regimen, Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow is going to start week 1. That's a given. They have no other QB on their roster. So Joe Burrow, week 1 starter, I'm saying he wins his first game week 3. I don't know their schedule, but first 2 weeks are going to be rough. I'm just taking a wild guess. Joe Burrow, fantastic college quarterback. And honestly, AJ Green, I'm not going to rely on too much. He's an old guy. He's not old, but he's 30, 31 years old, coming off a gruesome injury last year. Didn't really want to play for them. Got franchise tagged. I'm relying more on Tyler Boyd. That's the guy you want to build chemistry with Joe Burrow instantly because of his production last year with AJ Green off the field. I believe John Ross needs to come back. He needs to play slot receiver. He needs to do a lot better because that was his career has been off to an awful start. Yes, he ran the fastest 40 ever, but 40 times don't mean everything. We saw a lot of people run fast 40 but do nothing in the NFL. Hopefully John Ross isn't that guy. He was talented at Washington, but his first 2 or 3 seasons in the NFL have been duds. So Tyler Boyd's the guy that I really want to build a relationship with Joe Burrow. That's the guy I want chemistry with instantly. That's my number 1 receiver for the Bengals. AJ Green, with all his problems that he's had, his age, and his contract, he's still the most reliable target you have on your team, but he's going to be gone very soon. So you want to build that relationship between Tyler Boyd and Joe Burrow because of just the age that they are. They're going to grow and develop at the same exact time, and they're going to be around with their careers for a very long time together. So getting that chemistry down early between the two of them is going to be very, very, very needed for the Bengals' future. AJ Green, yet again, I'm very clarifying this because he is a very talented receiver, but you got him Joe Burrow. He's happy about that. He's got a quarterback who can throw the ball deep. I'm not relying too much on him, though. He's at the end of his career almost. I'm giving the hands to the younger guys. I'm letting AJ Green still go out there, but I'm really relying on everybody else. Speaking of relying on everybody else, Joe Mixon needs to perform just as he did last year, but 10 times better. Yes, you have Joe Burrow, who was the greatest college quarterback last year, but this is the NFL. We don't know how it's going to pan out yet. We don't know how long it's going to take. I'm starting with Joe Mixon immediately. He is the key to this offense right now. Fantastic running back, great cuts, and great vision out of the backfield. So I'm giving Joe Mixon the ball a lot. He's going to touch that ball constantly until Joe Burrow gets comfortable behind center for the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Mixon is a fantastic running back, and I think he's just the key to hold that Cincinnati Bengals offense together if they want to pose any threat at all, or so they don't go 1-15 again, basically, because that's not going to fly with Joe Burrow under center. He really doesn't like losing. He's going to take the ball into his own hands, but right now Mixon has the ball. He's the captain of that offense, kind of, him and Boyd, I believe. So letting Mixon run that offense and rely on him the most, I think, is going to be the most important thing for the Cincinnati Bengals to do this upcoming season. The defensive hardships, they really struggle. They have a few good safeties and a few good corners, but they're an older defensive line, they're an older unit, and then whenever they ship those guys off, they brought in younger guys and kind of got a little bit screwed with developing them all at the same time. So their defensive line with Geno Atkins is still fantastic. His age hasn't really shown yet, but you're going to have to develop other players eventually. They're not going to be around forever. So yes, your offense may be explosive with Joe Burrow, but it also may not be. They relied a lot on their defense last year to keep them in some games, and then they just couldn't because of how often they were on the field. So as long as Joe Burrow can keep his offense on the field and keep a nice balance between offense and defense, I think the Bengals can actually stand a chance to win a few games this year. They're clearly in a rebuild, so I'm not expecting a lot of wins. I'm saying at least 4 or 5 in my opinion, but I'm preparing for those. Defense is going to be really, really difficult for them, especially with how bad they played last year. But morale could be in an all-time high. Hopefully it is. They haven't had a lot of time to develop anybody, so this season's really wide open for any team. Now let's talk about the AFC North champs from last year, the Baltimore Ravens. They got some guy, I don't know his name. I think it's like Lamar or something. But Lamar Jackson, I kid by the way. It's Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, we saw in the playoff game, they really relied on him, but his turnovers were bad. But he was still the MVP. Can't take that away from him at all. He is a fantastic quarterback, fantastic athlete. Everything he did was right. He did everything right, but then he's still a little sloppy with his throws sometimes, which he's going to work on. As we saw, the pressure got to him a little bit too fast. His offensive line was not holding up. You can only run so much before teams start to figure you out. and just start setting spies and start sending everybody. So you can't escape everybody. Almost everybody. Lamar Jackson can almost escape everybody. The key to keeping Lamar as the GOAT for this upcoming season, he's the Madden cover athlete, so hopefully there's no Madden curse this year. He's a fantastic player. I don't want to see anything bad happen to him, knock on wood. And I honestly think that he's going to take an even bigger step forward with his passing this year. His rushing, he rushed for 1,100 yards almost last season, I believe, and his passing, I don't know his numbers, but he did everything that you could possibly want out of a quarterback. So keeping Hollywood Brown on that offense is essential. He gained some weight this year. His injury last year kind of lingered the whole season, so you need to make sure that you keep your number one target on the field, or else you're throwing to 3 tight ends the whole game. Kind of exactly what they did last year. No disrespect towards Mark Andrews at all. He played fantastically. Truly a Pro Bowl season. He did great, and you need a receiver, though. You always need a receiver. As we saw last year, the Eagles, with their tight ends, that was their only receivers. They struggled. So you got to keep Hollywood Brown in play. You can't let him go getting hurt all the time. You got to keep him safe, and you kind of need to get other receivers to help him, because if you just rely on Hollywood Brown, it's going to come back to bite you in the butt. He is a true deep threat. He has blazing speed, almost cheetah fast, but his height's, I think he's 5'8", 5'9", so jump balls aren't really going to work. So he's just a deep guy, and Lamar loved that. You could tell. So keeping him on the field, letting him be that guy to run deep and catch that ball, that is absolutely essential for the Ravens offense next year to take another step forward. The problem we saw last year in the AFC Championship game was, or the AFC Divisional Round game, was the run defense. It was really, really bad. Derrick Henry just kind of ran all over them, and then they couldn't really do anything. They just could not handle the run. They couldn't stop it, and that's the problem that keeps occurring with them. Their defensive and offensive line struggles have really, really been really the main cause of all their problems. Their offensive line is always getting bullied, which is causing Lamar to have to scramble, get sacked a lot, and make bad throws. But their defensive line kind of just folds over whenever somebody runs the ball at them. Yes, Derrick Henry is huge. He's very difficult to tackle, but still, having him run for that many yards on you in an AFC Divisional Round game after you're the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed, pretty rough to watch. So work on that run defense, really stack the box, figure out how to better that so you don't run into that problem again. Because if you can't stop the run, teams are just going to run it all over you. They don't have to pass. We saw it last year with the Titans. That's how they made it to the AFC Championship game. They only ran. So if you can stop that for most teams, then making them throw, you have good safeties, good corners, good linebackers. If you can make them throw to you guys, then I think that's ultimately going to win you games, get you to the Super Bowl, compete with Pat Mahomes. But the most important thing for me, at least for this offense, is you just got J.K. Dobbins. He was my favorite running back in the draft. He was absolutely nuts at Ohio State. They got a steal there in the second round. I think him coming into the Baltimore system that they run, very similar to what Ohio State runs. So I think he's just going to thrive. Yes, he has a lot of miles on his legs already, but it's J.K. Dobbins. He can do it all out of the backfield. So pairing him with Lamar Jackson is going to be nuts. You can use Mark Ingram as the 3-down back, kind of like what I said with James Conner, and just use Dobbins constantly. I think that'll be really productive for the Ravens offense, and I think that'll make them take another step forward with their run game, and ultimately, I think that would make them unstoppable. All right, guys, that's all I got. This was the AFC North edition of the If I Were in Your Shoes. So thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked, share. That would be much appreciated. We had a good bit of views last week. That really made me happy. Touched me right in the heart, guys. Thank you so much. But I'm Evan Lasek. I'll be putting out another video. Not sure about which division next week, but stay tuned. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you for watching our latest edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also follow us on Twitter at PSSNTV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.